You were listening to the Living Room Disciple podcast. We aim to model the discipleship conversations that should be happening on couches and around dining room tables. We're trying to grow our imaginations to think about what could and should be as we follow Jesus. We're asking ourselves questions about how we're being formed more or less like Jesus by the world around us. And we invite you into that conversation. So if you find this episode helpful, make sure to share it with a friend. Also, liking and subscribing, leaving a review, all those things help us grow and get the word out there. So please be sure to do that as well.
So today we are going to do one of those episodes that intertwines some of the ideas of levity into the mix as we continue to pursue in the other episodes our conversations with guests on the topic of suffering. And the thing that inspires our decision to insert and infuse these particular conversations between Phil and Nick and me with that levity is this idea born of the verse from Romans 5, verse 3, that says that we rejoice in our sufferings. Now, that entire chapter talks about suffering and what it does in us, but we want to just hone in on this idea of rejoicing in our sufferings and maybe some of the practices that help connect us with joy. Phil and I had a chance to talk about children's literature and film, but today we're going to ask this question about how laughter forms us. Now, I want to be really careful to say, I'm not talking about one of those practices like the laughing church where we just put on false laughter.
Wait, hold on. Is the laughing church like a thing?
I've never heard of this.
There is.
Okay.
It's I want to be really careful to not like, you're great. I love that you already made us like it's gonna be this conversation where we just laugh and not take ourselves or our theology too seriously, right?
Yeah.
Because the more that we try to take things too seriously, the more I think that we lose track of the fact that the Lord is good and that He made crazy, funny things, animals like the capybara and the
platypus,
pangolin, the platypus.
Or the unicorn of the ocean, the narwhal.
That's right. That I honestly thought was a fictional creature. I really did.
Yeah. Well, remember the narwhal song?
Yes.
Nick, do you?
No.
What? Like, oh, come on. This is like...
Okay, now
sing
you have to
it.
Sing it
for our listeners.
Oh gosh, this is like early. This is right before 2008, 2009. I mean, it's just a song that says narwhal, and then but it has like a whole thing and has like a jingle. It was one of like the early
Right.
internet memes. You know what I mean? Like when memes were for like nerdy kids. You know what I mean?
Back before memes were cool.
So I have a quick story about that. So I was a pretty nerdy kid in 2005, 2009 kind of area. I graduated in 2009 from high school, and me and my friends were all into these things called memes, memes, but like it was only for like the nerdy kids, unlike the darker parts of the web. And then a number of years later, in 2014, I'm teaching high school, and this ninth grade kid, they're passing notes. And I'm like, oh, what's that kind of thing? Trying to figure out what it means to be a teacher at 23. And anyways, like, I caught one of them like passing notes or something. And he was like, you wouldn't understand, Mr. Snyder. It's a meme. And I'm like, whoa. We invented the meme. Like, I still remember this like very indignant Phil who was a little frustrated. Anyway, that has nothing to do with anything. So,
but I do have to say, you're not the only person who taught at 23. That is totally my story as well. We had not yet connected over that. Was that also an experience of yours, Nick? Did you teach it at 23?
I substitute taught probably around 23, yeah.
There you
and
go.
Youth pastored.
So we were all, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
There should be a minimum age for teaching, and it should be higher than 23.
Oh, I don't know. There's something about... There's something about like what you just talked about, this indignation of being like, excuse me, I'm only 5 years older than you and we're still cool or whatever. And it makes us have to laugh at ourselves. So there's the nice little wraparound there.
Hey.
That was definitely where my sense of how seriously I had taken myself
Mm,
was very clearly reflected to me in leading a classroom full of students who were 5, 6, 7, and 8 years younger than me. Yeah. And so, this relationship that we have to laughter, I want to connect it to suffering in a very precise way, in that while we are learning, we are creating these pathways in the brain, right?
mm,
I was out
mhm,
walking with my dog this morning, and our field is one of those fields that there are a ton of wildflowers and long grasses, but you
mhm,
can start seeing the places where he and I have been walking even over the last 3 weeks. It's rained, it's been sunny, but these places that we have begun to walk
mm.
together
Blazing a
are
trail.
showing, yeah, they're showing the signs
Mhm,
of our passage.
mhm,
And our brains work the same way.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
And that when we practice these good, healthy practices of play, of engaging in children's literature, of laughter, pursuing humor and laughter, we're doing good brain work. We're
mhm,
doing
mhm,
good discipleship work that needs to run in parallel lines. And this is where I was also really taking note this morning, is that I will go out one path, but I'll come back a different one. And both of them, I can see them, I can find them now.
mhm,
That's what we're doing when we practice both laughter and intentionality and leaning into the suffering that the Lord allows us to experience, and not avoiding that pathway, but making it smooth so that we're running down it more easily, and hopefully running to the heart of the Father in doing
mhm.
so much more easily.
So what you're saying is like having a rhythm or pattern of laughter,
Mm,
like laughing frequently, creates neural pathways in our mind that make it easier to to laugh and to find joy.
yes.
Um, and I mean, I think there's a good theology to that, like a good way of, I'll even just say a good way of understanding life in light of joy. And I think joy's
Mhm.
physical manifestation is laughter.
Yeah. And I can't wait to have more of you guys' thoughts on this. Thanks for bearing with me as I share a bunch of my reflections right out the gate. But part of what turned me to this question was recognizing we've been going through a lot of struggle as a family.
Mhm,
And it feels like laughter in our household has been diminished in
mhm,
this
mhm,
process.
mhm,
And
mhm,
I was just challenged as I reflected on that in my bed last night and was praying and was going, Lord, there's this picture of the woman in Proverbs 31 about laughing at the days to come. And I want to be a woman who encourages joy in my household and who recognizes that a part of that means practicing not taking myself too
mhm,
seriously, not thinking that it's my job to make all the things happen, and that I can laugh at the things to come because it's the Father's provision for me. So, my questions to you guys, I want to know how that resounds with you. Where does that echo in the chambers of your heart? But also, what are some practices that you engage as a family or in your peer group that help to foster that sense of joy so that it's at the ready, even amidst trial and suffering?
I'm really intrigued because my mind immediately went to the passage I think it's in Philippians that says rejoice always, and again I say rejoice, like in
Mm.
case always wasn't enough, I'm going to
mhm.
say it again.
Yeah.
Rejoice. And the quick easy response to that is, how am I supposed to rejoice always? Like sometimes can I just say things suck, right? We don't want to
Mhm,
rejoice in moments of suffering and hardship and difficulty. So what does it look like to rejoice when lament is the appropriate response, right? And I think the idea of cultivating joy and laughter as a discipleship practice and even a creating neural pathway practice is so fascinating to me. I'd never really thought about it through that lens anymore. But how do we respond with rejoicing in the midst of hardship if we have not discipled ourselves and been discipled by the Lord to enter into
Mm.
rejoicing, regardless of our external circumstances? And it brings me back on a lighter note to the conversation you and I had, Kelsey, about suffering, that suffering has to be held in tandem with hope. And I hadn't made the connection of the way that laughter really plays a role in that hope. It keeps the door open between two seemingly totally separated, distant things. Rather than there being a brick wall between them, laughter can be a door between hope and suffering.
I think this is one of the reasons like community is so important, and it's one of the saddest things that it's so forsaken in our church. And I think this is because like children are such a pathway to this as a part of our formation, and the fact that like we often remove children from our congregation into their own little sub congregation, and how many of us are not doing life in intimate community. Oh, gosh, how many community groups are in our churches that like literally like are for children and not like you can come to this home group if you don't have children, right? Like get a baby. It's just, in my opinion, silly because all people in all walks of life need children. And I think that one of the reasons is I think about when I was grieving the loss of my little brother a few years ago. It was a really deep, difficult time for me, obviously. But every day, like my kids didn't understand that, right? They didn't understand that you're not supposed to make jokes with dad. Like they're still going to run through the house naked. They're still going to like say stupid things or really funny things. Like they were the reason that every single day I was weeping and crying and laughing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just inseparable. And I was blessed that for this season of my life, these children are in my home. But they're not going to be in my home forever. Or I'll just say it this way, they're going to grow up. They're going to be teenagers, and that quality that the Lord's given them will be worn away. And they're going to need...
They'll just pull out memes.
But I'm going to need to be investing in other young families and babysitting kids and being in their homes and experiencing like reading scripture with them so I can see their kids say the darndest things and do the darndest things. I just think that like there's something about children have are naturally the catalyst to laughter, and it stands to reason that's one of the most important parts they play in the church. And it's sad that oftentimes, and you all have heard me talk about this. Nick's really heard me talk about this a lot. I really am very adamant that children need to be fully included in the ecclesiastical body, but I think this is one of the reasons.
I lend my amen for sure. But I'm not going to keep talking because I want to hear more from you, Nick, about intentional practices pursuing laughter or unintentional, like what Phil has described. Just the I guess there's intentionality there, right? In having children in your home.
Yeah.
And having them in the first place. But yeah.
Yeah. Or
how would you answer
intentionally
that question?
being, like Phil was saying, intentionally seeking out children to be near. Not so that you can
in like a not
them.
creepy way.
In a not creepy way. Let's be really clear.
Right.
Yes.
Like totally appropriate, background checked way.
Right. Absolutely.
That kind of thing. So okay.
Yes. But I was going to say, oftentimes I think we would take the posture of, I want to invest in a child's life.
Yeah.
But this is almost the exact opposite posture of, I actually need a child to invest in my life to help me be more childlike.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very intentional, not that you can't also mentor them at the same time, but thinking of it not as charity that you're doing for this child, but as a mutually beneficial and edifying thing for you and the child or the young person. I think that is really a wonderful, healthy thing. My mind was also brought to, I don't have a specific memory, but I have, I guess, kind of this vibe of a collection of memories from my life that I wonder if it resonates with y'all, that during some of the hardest moments, either of my life or of somebody else's life, where I've been a shoulder that they've been able to cry on, just kind of this visceral moment of tears turning into laughter. And it doesn't mean the pain has gone away, but some of the most sincere, joyful, just like throw all caution to the wind and laughter that I've ever experienced, I think has been with tears streaming down the face. Like there's just something about, I'm already in my emotions so much, or this person who's
Mhm,
crying on my
mhm.
shoulder is already in their emotions so much that when that pain and emotional struggle, then some type of joke happens, or a kid runs in doing something silly, or a memory comes up from a time long ago that was really funny, and the tears turn into laughter. There's something about that moment specifically that strikes me as different than other kinds of laughter, and strikes me as more powerful and more powerful in discipleship, in reminding us that there is joy even in pain.
Mhm, mhm. And what you mentioned about Philippians 4,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same as we see in Romans 5, that it's that juxtaposition of be anxious for nothing, in prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, present your request to God, rejoice in the Lord. Like, it's all of the emotions and the ones that seem
Mm.
like they're really contradictory,
Yeah.
but that the Lord is saying, hey, come with all of it. And all of it's appropriate. And in fact, partners, they partner with one another.
Mhm.
Earlier today, I had the great privilege of speaking on the phone with one of my mentors from seminary days. And this mentor of mine is going through suffering in a pretty major way.
Mhm.
And I was struck by the fact that the Lord, provisioned that, ordained that we would have this conversation together on the same day that we're speaking about laughter. And I think of the amount of joy that this woman has brought to my heart through the years, and that she has been somebody who has embraced children with laughter. And so she's able to approach the days to come, the days of sorrow, with a childlike quality that has been mentored in her, like you guys are mentioning. I want to also reflect on what you said, Phil, about our ecclesiology,
Mhm.
that when we practice that inclusion and that multi-generational mix, it's not only better for our hearts, it's more glorifying
Yeah.
to the Lord when we do that. I hope that, speaking of glorifying to the Lord, there was a bird that
Oh,
just sang really
100%
loud in
heard
the
that.
mix. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
laughing with
It's
us.
calling out its praise. Yeah,
But
that's
it was
right.
like it was like a cliche bird call. Like it felt like it my mind
Like
went
I'd
to a
put
Disney movie, like a Disney like Snow White, you know what I
I
mean?
pressed a button over here
Yeah.
Cue
Yes, it
the
sounded.
orchestra.
for the Snow White track.
Hmm.
Yes.
No, it's the birds are very happy today and they are bringing me
Good
joy.
Rejoice
And
joy.
it does,
always.
sometimes they sound, yeah. But what I was arguing is that when we practice that multi-generational fellowship,
Mhm.
that brings more glory and joy to the Lord's heart, the one who made us to image him. And we talk so much about that idea of being image bearers together. We image him best in community, not as
Mhm.
individuals.
Mhm.
And so we also image him best when it's the full gamut
Yeah.
of the fellowship.
And keeping on the imaging and relating
Yeah.
it to laughter, laughter
Yes.
keeps me humble. I
Mm.
don't know, like, you know
Mm.
what I mean? Like, there's something about laughter easing the seriousness and the tension of something. There's the laughing at myself, laughing at situations, but like, there's a level setting atmosphere to laughter. I don't know, like just recently, just dealing with some heavy things in what I feel like the
Mm.
Lord's calling me to do, and trying to wrestle through what my future holds, all these kind of things, like really big questions, that
Mm.
I'm wrestling in my own spiritual life. But in my own conversations with the Lord and my own time with Him, because like over the years, I've developed a habit of laughter comes easily to me. It means that even in those conversations, I can have moments where I realize how ridiculous I'm being or how overblown I'm being. And instead of
Mm.
defending it, I laugh at myself. You know what I mean? Like, how ridiculous that I'm stressed about this thing when the Lord's given me this thing. And I can have that rational like connection,
Mm.
Mm.
but also it's just funny. Like it's just a little, y'all. I'm an entitled little kid. Like I'm super spoiled. Like I'm, you know what I mean? Like I'm whining to the Lord, and
Mm.
he's like giving me breath, and he's given me a place to live, and he's giving me like, I don't know, just having these moments where maybe it's not funny to everybody else, but you know, like it's an inside joke between me and the Lord about how freaking entitled this kid
Mm.
is. And I can still remember the 18-year-old Phil who had nothing, was literally sleeping in a van some days, and coming to the Lord, and then like process where I've been, and I'm still like pissing and moaning for more. Like, you know, it's just so ridiculous. And I think too that there's something good about being able to make these connections, and then when you experience that connection, you just laugh. You just, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And it feels to me like it just puts me in my place with the Lord. Like, oh yeah, this is how I'm supposed to be thinking. It's ridiculous that I feel this way, and I can kind of like humble myself, and I don't know. I think laughter's like a good level setter.
Yeah, it can bring
That's good.
perspective. Like Kelsey's been saying, it's a way to not take ourselves too seriously in an age where I think social media has both brought memes, but also has exacerbated this idea that every person needs to share their opinion. And I think
Yeah.
laughter can be a way that we are reminded my opinion actually doesn't matter that much, and maybe it's better if we just have a good laugh, you know?
Well,
Um,
your opinion doesn't. I have a podcast.
right, right. I'll just tell jokes though. Yeah, I think laughter can easily look like a waste of time if you're not paying attention.
Mm.
Yeah.
And certainly there are ways to uh, not laugh the way that you should laugh. Meaning, I think Ephesians 5 talks about coarse joking. There are things that you should not go to intentionally for laughter, just because, well, laughter is good for me, and the Bible says rejoice always, so I'm going to engage in this, right? There are things
Can
that we
we
know
can we
should
talk
be
about
avoided.
that
Yes, for
actually?
sure. Yeah.
Because I think laughter reveals areas of our hearts too. Like what
Oh,
we find
interesting.
Mm.
funny
Yeah,
is a really good like check engine light
that's true.
for
Mm.
you know what I mean.
Mm.
I remember, you know, a much there. I still see it today, but I remember being much younger, and coarse jokes of all types, you know, were pretty normative in my life and in my
Hmm.
friend group. And you know, the same jokes that I feel like I laughed at when I was like 16 are things that would genuinely grieve me now.
Mm.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And I don't know. I want to hear your all's thoughts on that. Like, I feel like for me, laughter seems to be a good heart check. I don't know. Is it Kelsey? What do you think?
I really appreciate that conclusion. Laughter as a lens to seeing what I think is funny. Yeah, like to see into my heart about what I perceive as being funny. When you were talking, I started thinking about Shakespeare because when you think of kind of body humor or something like that, like immediately you kind of start thinking of people like the Bard, or at least I do. And part of it is
I
because
think most people go
in
right
my
from
household,
fart jokes and sex jokes to Shakespeare. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%
I
for
mean,
sure. Yeah, we're all
I mean,
right
it's
there.
true.
Tell
Come
us
on,
more,
like
Kelsey.
let's be really serious. That is so true of Shakespeare, and maybe the reason it's so easy for me to just pull off the shelf is because Shakespeare is actually pretty big in my teen girls' lives.
Okay.
So, particularly my middle daughter is a Shakespeare fanatic because she
Mm.
is an excellent thespian. She understands his sense of humor.
Mm.
She can bring humor out in his comedies. And I love, in fact, there are so many times where his plays within plays poke fun at it. Is it a tragedy comedy? Is it a tragic comedy romance? There,
Mm.
he is hilarious poking fun at himself. And he is able to see the humor in a lot of different people who are either taking themselves too seriously or who um, there is humor even in the lot of some of his more pitiful creatures who um, may have been drunkards, for example.
Mhm.
That's like, I think the best thing. Like, so I was thinking through this lens, okay, is it okay to laugh, or what type of laughter are we having when we laugh at a pitiful character
Mm.
there?
Mhm.
Is this the
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
laughter that Phil is pointing out is the kind of laughter that reveals what I think is funny, or is it the kind of laughter that's a laughter of release, but also kind of the laughter and mourning, like what you were
Yeah.
talking about, Nick?
Mm-hmm.
And it is fascinating to me to think about laughter's function. And it's, we're trying to bring a certain amount of rationality to it, to describe and to bring some categories to our thinking. And it's only going to go so far, because there's also this sense that our affections are difficult to wrangle. It's hard to see if it is either this or this in the other category. Like, I'm putting it in this bucket and it's this type of laughter, or nope, it belongs over in this other bucket. That's not necessarily the way it works. Just like our emotions don't remain tidy. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but it's what was coming up for me, that laughter, we do have the opportunity to examine our heart through laughter, as well as to release that sense of it's up to me to examine it super perfectly well. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of synthesizing what both you and Nick said here, Phil, in going,
Mm-hmm.
laughter has multi functions and sometimes operating at the same time. And if I'm feeling responsible, I pointed to this in the beginning. If I'm feeling really ultra responsible, it's much harder for me to laugh than if I'm entrusting myself to the provision and the
Mm-hmm.
responsibility for me and my people that really ultimately belongs to the Lord. And then I can laugh and I can release, or I can examine.
As you seek to follow Jesus, do you ever feel like life just gets in the way? That's why we believe it's so important to take a step back, look at the things of life, and ask, how is this forming us? See, following in Jesus' footsteps is the heart behind this podcast, and so we want you to come alongside us in that mission. Would you take a moment to visit livingroomdisciple.com and click on Become a Supporter? There, you can make a monthly contribution to the work we're doing here so we can keep giving you more resources to help form and shape you to look more like Jesus. As you're talking, I wonder, and I might be way off here, I've never had this thought until this conversation, so kind of stream of consciousness here, but I wonder if
Mm.
our laughter can reveal our insecurities. Oftentimes, our comedians that are like on a national stage will become famous because they joke about things that we're too scared to have real conversations about. And so we
Mm-hmm.
laugh about them instead. Or in our personal lives, we might make coarse jokes because we are insecure. Like Phil and I, when we were, I resonated with what Phil described as a younger man, where our friend groups would have coarse joking, and that's not really true anymore. And I wonder if what changed about us is we got older and got married, and we're not as insecure about sexual things, right? And I wonder if there's laughter makes our insecurity easier to process through, whether that's with personal insecurities or big, gigantic, painful issues that, like racism, for example. Racism could be something that, for a white person to make jokes at a black person's expense, almost everybody would say that is inappropriate. Um, Even if it was done from a place of I'm insecure to talk about this, so I'm going to make a joke about it, it still
Sure.
would come across as inappropriate. Whereas for a black comedian to stand on a stage
Mm-hmm.
and use historical things that have happened to black communities as launching pads for jokes, that is a way to process through traumas and do that maybe in a healthy way where laughter is healing.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. But yeah, laughter does a lot more than we might give it credit for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, the key is not to put self-awareness on a pedestal, but to process the fact of like what I laugh at and why I laugh at it is really indicative of like what comes out. Because there's a lot that should be grieved. And to your point, Nick, because of insecurities or because of a feeling of helplessness, we feel like the only thing we could do is to laugh. I think this is actually one of the reasons for the rise. I kind of grew up with the rise of like satire news, so like
Mm-hmm.
Jon Stewart, like The Daily Show is kind of like the I don't want to say the first, but kind of I think what mainstreamed the idea, where like the only way you could kind of digest the news was to laugh while you were,
Mm.
you know. And I'm actually not here to condemn or promote that. I'm just saying that like I still have moments where I think through, am I laughing at what grieves the Lord's heart?
Mm.
And am I not laughing at the things the Lord is laughing about? Like, am I
Mm.
taking ultra serious that which does not weigh upon the Lord at all? You know? And when I do
Mhm.
that, I feel like I have set, and I'll give some simple examples, Um, I really do think that anything, any joke that, not just joke like a punchline joke, but any time that we laugh and the core element of whatever is to the detriment or exploitation of somebody else, right? And this
Mhm.
often comes out in political rhetoric. When we laugh at somebody else, can you believe so and so believes whatever? I think Christians are notorious for this. I think mainstream preaching is notorious for this. I think it's a big problem in the church. So I think this is really relevant. We will laugh at the ridiculousness of the sinful world, or how can people not believe this or believe that? It's just, that is not never humor that the Lord's laughing at too. And yet Phil Snyder takes super seriously and very worried about my future. Okay. Like I'm very concerned. Okay. I do not laugh about this. And the Lord is very confident in my future. He's actually not worried at all. He has told me that by worrying, I'm not going to add any hairs to this head, like any numbers to the days or anything. Like nothing's going to change, despite the fact that I am ultra obsessed about my future right now, and I should be weightless enough to laugh about what the future
Mm.
holds, because I should be confident enough in the new kingdom to come that I should be laughing about that. And so what I'm just saying is, like, for me, I feel a temptation to laugh at people who are they're just not as smart as me. I don't know if you realize that, but like I'm just kidding. But like I just feel like a temptation there, and yet I don't feel a
That's what makes
temptation to laugh.
Shakespeare so safe.
Oh, tell me more about
Because you're
that.
not laughing, yeah, because you're not laughing at any political party or any person really who is alive today. That's what makes Shakespeare safe. I mean, like King Lear, there is no King Lear that I know of right now.
Okay.
Although I don't think that that's a comedy per se. But anyway, no,
It's,
I really
it's really dark, actually.
right. I really, yeah. In fact, I really appreciate what you're saying though. Like, again, laughter as a lens, and how is it revealing what I'm believing? That's so good. And the reason why I'm returning to Shakespeare is actually because I don't think I finished a thought, but because I just left it behind, but you made me need to return to it, that we can um, find in stories, and some of them children's stories, that there are these characters in them that deal with vices. I return to, being drunkards is one of the examples
Mm-hmm.
that tends to trace its way through even a lot of children's literature. I was watching Tintin, the movie, recently with my
Oh,
kids,
that's a blast from the
and
past.
it's great. It's such a good story, and it's well written, but one of the major characters is an alcoholic for sure, but he is also very comedic.
Mm.
And so we ask these questions of, what are we laughing at and how are we laughing? And what is it teaching our hearts? Is it teaching us that this is okay, that it's okay to laugh at this very broken character and his vice? What does that teach our children?
Mm.
So how are we exercising laughter? And so I guess I would say that I'm really appreciating that discerning question about the posture of our hearts, because of course this is what we're constantly running back to here, is how are these things forming the postures of our hearts? What is our heart's attitude as we engage in laughter? So thank you for helping me think some more about that, Phil. I really appreciate it.
I want to piggyback
And
on
Nick, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I want to
Yeah,
piggyback
go.
on something Phil was saying too, because I've also never thought through the lens of we should be laughing at the things God is laughing at. And in preparation for this episode, I just Googled, as any good millennial would, laughter
I'm
in the
proud of
Bible.
you. I'm so
Yeah,
proud of you.
yeah. And was just looking at what does the Bible say about
Did
laughter.
you
And
end up
one,
on openbible.com?
I don't remember.
Oh, come on. That's like the
Sorry.
place to be. Anyway, don't continue on.
Maybe I did. But the verse that jumped out at me most was from Psalm 37, and it says, "The Lord laughs." And so I was just going back and looking at that passage, and I found that one and another psalm that also talks about the Lord laughing. And in Psalm 2, it's describing the nations are raging, which I think is a really good description of the world today, but probably the world through all of human history. The nations are raging. And then it says, but the Lord is seated in the heavens laughing. Like, wow. The nations raging, at the time the Psalms were written 3,000 years ago or so. The nations were raging then, and we're not really worried about what people then were very rightfully worried about, right? The Lord has this perspective that allows him to laugh. Not that he's laughing at human suffering, but he knows, like, Babylon comes to an end. Egypt comes to an end. Rome comes to an end. Like, these empires, these nations that are raging and destroying come to an end. And so he has this perspective to see those foolish people who are trying to seize power and destroy, and their days are numbered.
I want to dive in on that psalm too, though.
Yeah.
Because he's laughing at the nations, and his response is, because I've already, this is what it says in verse 6, but as for me, I have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain.
Yeah.
And it's a messianic psalm saying that he laughs at the machinations of the nations because he's already appointed Jesus as king over this.
That's right.
This earth.
See, it was appropriate that I referred to King Lear.
Hey.
For you.
As being laughed at.
Nailed it.
Perfect.
All right.
Yeah. And then the other one.
Go for it. Keep going.
The other one was Psalm 37, I think verse 13. It's talking about how the wicked are trying to destroy the righteous, but God laughs at them because he knows their days are numbered. Like, just this perspective of when we are hurt or harmed by somebody, and we can just smolder and have so much rage or bitterness, and probably appropriately so. Like, the suffering that can be brought on by other people can be really painful. But also, what if we were to step out of our perspective a little bit, take ourselves out of the main character role, as we've talked about many times on this podcast, and see things through God's perspective? And God knows their days are numbered. And so it gives this, returning back to what we were talking about earlier, laughing at what God laughs at, I think can give us this perspective that the massive national or international problems that seem so daunting to us can actually be laughed at, to give us that perspective and that humility. And when the wicked are attacking the righteous, we can actually somehow laugh at that, knowing that the wicked's days are numbered, that there is a king who has already been installed and will come to reign in fullness. There is already a God who reigns in righteousness and will see to it that all things are made just and right. And so we can sit back, and there are times when we can laugh even in the face of the absurdity of the world that we live in.
Laugh at the machinations of those who think that they can bring their goals to an end, right? Because we know what's coming. But I do, and I know you believe this too, but I'll just verbalize it, while grieving and defending.
Yes.
And I think this is the complexity of the human emotion. It's the complexity of the emotions that we see displayed by God. It's the complexity of like there's these two things happening at the same time, right? That like God can laugh and does laugh at like these people, like they're just so insane. They think they can control the destiny. They think that the biggest problem in the world is those people. They think that they can they think they can, and like it's absurd to think that they have any sovereignty that isn't handed to them by the Lord and
Right.
retracted immediately when the Lord wants to retract it.
Yeah, I found 2 verses that say God laughs. There are countless verses, way more than that say
Yeah.
that the Lord is weeping at sin and suffering. And so
Yeah,
it's not
there
that God
are,
is
yeah.
just sitting up there taking things lightly and being like, I don't care that they
Yeah.
suffer, I'm just laughing. That is not the point. The point is finding perspective. But I think to your point, lament is still so important. Grieving is so important.
And how often do we become afraid of the machinations of others? Again,
Yeah.
I know I keep coming back to politics, but we're about to vote, and
Yeah,
we just
it's
came
on
off that
everyone's
whole
mind.
series. It's on everyone's mind, right? What is this leader thinking? What is that leader thinking? I can't even look. Is LinkedIn even a social media site? I don't know. Okay, I thought it was where everyone put their virtual resume, but every time I go on there right now, it's somebody telling me how like Kamala this or Trump this or whatever, and it's just so everyone's afraid of, right, the machinations of if that one gets into office and if that one gets into, and it's like the Lord
I don't
laughs.
get political stuff on my LinkedIn. It's because of your voracious appetite for the
I did
political.
not do anything to this algorithm. Okay? I didn't do anything. All right?
I'm poking fun at you that I might laugh.
Okay.
Hey.
I don't even know like what's going on. The only reason I get on there is to update my resume and to delete messages from people who want to sell me stuff in my chat. Like, I don't actually intend to get on there to hear about political. All I'm saying though is we should be laughing, right? At like, man, like whatever the outcome of this election is, I don't have to worry about it. None of it is going to come even remotely close to thwarting the will of God. None of it. Instead, we worry, and I struggle with that too. You know, I've got a candidate in my mind. I mean, if that person gets in there, like, like I'm foolish. But the key is do I acknowledge that as foolishness, or do I justify myself? And right now in this moment, I'm acknowledging his foolishness. But the moment we get off this, I'll just become a sinner again, probably.
Well, it is this tension of it might matter to your life and to your children's lives and to their children's lives, right? While at the same time, in the cosmic scale of things, it can be laughed at. And so it is this tension that we keep coming back to of how to live as a citizen of the kingdom of heaven while I live as a real human being with a real family and real friends and real relationships and real concerns here on this earth here and now.
But as you said, Nick, the concerns on this earth pale in light of the kingdom coming and the fact that Jesus has already been seated on the throne. And I think of another place in scripture where laughter is really profound, and that is in the son of the promise made to Abraham.
Yeah.
Isaac, which means he laughs, was given to Sarah in her old age. And she even says, and for this, I'm going to be the object of laughter for generations to come. And that she even is able to laugh at herself. But it is in, again, that laughter that comes from knowing the Lord's provision. And a laughter that comes from a child helping to renew that in us. And not just any child, but the child of the covenant who points to the one who's going to fulfill that covenant and sit on the throne. That is our ultimate provision and hope. And that gives us reason for laughter. So, listener, how are you pursuing laughter in your life with your children or the children of others? How are you allowing it to refresh your soul? Even maybe in the face of suffering, if that's your story right now. How is laughter a part of your practice towards deeper leaning into the one who has given you everything in Christ and much reason for joy? Those are the questions that I would have today.
The Living Room Disciple podcast exists to explore the ways we are formed by our experiences, our culture, our beliefs, and our habits. And we are passionate about seeing followers of Jesus transformed to live as Jesus lived. For more information or to support our work, visit livingroomdisciple.com today. We want to thank Micah Pop for producing the podcast, Eric Church for getting it to you, and Daniel Ramirez for composing the music. And thank you for listening to the Living Room Disciple podcast, where discipleship finds a home.